welcome to this roundtable on breaking silos, creating an inclusive Mumbai. The Rosa Luxemburg Foundation is one of the largest political education institutions in Germany today, and it sees itself as part of the intellectual discourse of democratic socialism. Observer Research Foundation is a public policy think tank, and it aims to influence policy formulation for building a strong and prosperous India. ORF pursues these goals by providing informed and productive inputs, in-depth research and stimulating discussions. The foundation is supported in its mission by a cross-section of India's leading public figures, academics and business leaders. ORF Mumbai was set up to conduct complementary research and policy advocacy on issues of local importance and of relevance to urban India at large. We have selected a broad mandate in Mumbai consisting of 6 diverse research areas: education, health, urban renewal, inclusive and sustainable development, youth development, and promotion and preservation of India's priceless heritage, arts and culture. ORF views collaboration with think tanks and research organizations across the globe as a vital part of its mandate. Brookings and Ford Foundation are among our other partners. I now invite Rumi Ejaz from our ORF Delhi, who heads the Urban Renewal Desk there, to say a few words. Thank you.
I have been looking at this issue for some time, and I thought of placing some starting points before we proceed with this discussion. I think this problem of social exclusion in cities seems to be growing, and the significance of this issue has been well recognized and understood by the global community. And accordingly, some innovative practices and measures have been put in place to deal with this problem. But social exclusion continues to be a challenging area for many governments of developing countries and developed countries. If we look at the current trends in urban life and in the urban governance processes, I can see some scope for people like us to do some contribution, meaningful contribution, and also to at the same time develop a deeper understanding on this subject. And that is the reason that we are working with our partner Rosa Luxemburg Foundation on this sensitive issue. And if we are able to document some of the ideas that are presented during the course of discussion in today's seminar, then that would be a very important achievement, and it would help us in our research. When we further think about this issue of social inclusion, I understand that this problem has arisen or seems to have arisen because our governing institutions, they have not been able to understand the requirements of the diverse sections of societies that live in urban areas and cities. And moreover, we have completely failed to, I would say, to a great extent in managing urban growth. Urbanization, as we all know, is a phenomenon that is being observed in many developing countries of the world. And it basically brings together people from diverse social, economic, and cultural backgrounds. While this diversity in itself is not the problem is in the growing social and economic inequalities. During the course of our work, I also understood that if we are unable to manage this diversity or the social differences that exist in cities and urban areas, especially the larger ones, then I think that there are possibilities of the occurrence of problems such as low levels of economic growth and crime and stress and tension and aggressive levels of civil society movements. When you look at some cities in the world, then there seems to be a clear division that cities are composed of two parts. The rich people in cities, or the people who belong to the middle income group, they, what they do is they live in planned colonies and also as well as in well-serviced gated complexes, as we know. And the poor people, or the people who belong to the low income group, they live in either slum areas or the peripheral or the fringe parts of the city, or the unauthorized settlements, like as observed in the case of Delhi. Access to, and also we know that many of the people who live in slum settlements, they do not have access to sufficient infrastructure and services. So access to transportation, infrastructure, land, housing, and various urban services like water, sanitation, electricity, health, education are the determining factors of a socially inclusive and equitable urban development. And many groups in cities, especially, they do not have sufficient access to basic necessities of life. Now, if we do an extensive survey of literature, then we learn that some groups, they say that if a country's agenda is to promote economic growth and development, then such problems are bound to occur. But then there is another set of scholars who say that there is still a possibility to maintain lower levels of inequalities. Inequality, if we try to understand what it is, and as you all know, it can be observed from the patterns of income and consumption trends, and also in certain non-income measures like illiteracy and malnutrition and infant mortality. So, and also inequality, the most significant example is the incidence of slums in large cities, where significant proportions of the slum residents, they do not have access to basic amenities like health, education, and even employment opportunities. Now, in this entire debate and discussion, what is often forgotten is the role or the contribution of the marginalized groups and the informal sector or the unorganized sector in the building and running of cities. The question that comes to my mind after understanding this issue is what kind of policies and practices are needed that can ensure that urban development, equity, and economic growth go hand in hand. And I learned through readings that people say that it is possible to achieve this by effectively integrating the marginalized groups into the political and the policy frameworks and in the decision-making process. Now, this brings us to the concept of urban inclusiveness. And this is basically involving the community or empowerment of the community to, so that their basic concerns and needs are met and addressed. There have been several attempts in India also, insofar as urban inclusiveness is concerned. And one is if I have been working on local government matters, and I see that there has been a reservation of seats in local governments for the scheduled caste, for the scheduled tribe, for the backward classes, and for women. And what this means is that they now get a chance to participate in the decision-making process. But I've also learned through my research that this kind of participation has been extremely limited, because there are various influence of various social, economic, and political factors during the decision-making process in municipal meetings, because of which certain sections of the society benefit, whereas others or the representatives of the marginalized groups do not benefit. Furthermore, it is also understood that there is insufficient transparency in the planning and implementation of infrastructure projects. Therefore, the same problem arises that certain sections benefit and others do not. Now, Another example of urban inclusiveness can be community participation. And in this, in the infrastructure development and in the management of local services. So there are numerous examples from developing countries, from India, where communities have been involved in various matters. For example, in countries like Nigeria, Brazil, Indonesia, Philippines, the local government has, what they have done is they have conducted consultative meetings with the poor communities and the low-income communities to understand their concerns and to involve them in various matters which directly concern them. Another example of urban inclusiveness is observed from recent Government of India policies like Ministry of Housing and Urban Poverty Alleviation. What they are doing is that they are trying to do inclusive, preparing inclusive city development plans or master plans in which they intend to address the concerns of the urban poor. Also, in the Jawaharlal Nehru National Urban Renewal Mission, which is a major Government of India urban development program, they have a concept of social audit wherein several development projects would be implemented through a participatory approach so that the concerns of the marginalized groups are taken into account. If we also further think about this subject, then the point that comes to our mind or my mind is that how much capacity does a city have in terms of the institutions that are running cities and the pressure of population. There has been a constant migration from either villages or from smaller urban centers to large cities, and there is a limit to which the city governments can withstand or control. And in this context, certain regional development strategies or approaches need to be given greater importance. So I think these could be some of the starting points in which I have tried to identify or describe the concept and the concerns that exist in this sector. Thank you.
And, Mr. Das, thank you for being here. And we'll be expecting, we are expecting the second main key speaker of the first session, Dr. Sharit Bhaumik. He too is unfortunately stuck up in traffic. Actually, if I'm not wrong, there is some accident that has occurred on the ceiling that led to the traffic woes of Mumbai. Something that we are all discussing today. So, like to go to the next step, and we have with us to chair the first session, Dr. Ajit Ranade. He doesn't need much introduction. Besides being the chief economist of the Aditya Birla Group, Dr. Ranade, if you have been watching ABC these days, he is also making some regular appearances and helping people make their grows. So, thank you for joining us, sir. Before we go on to the presentations by Mr. P.K. Das on the topic of slum proliferation in Mumbai, there's a small presentation made by ORF, so we'll just begin.
Mumbai, and by Mumbai here I mean Mumbai city and Mumbai suburbs. We'll come to MMR as a region a little later. Mumbai is a city of 12.4 million people. These are as per the provisional census figures of 2011. And we pack in a punch of a density of 20,500, nearly 20,500 people per square kilometer. And certainly one of the most populous cities and one of the most dense cities, not only in India, but all across the world. Despite how small Mumbai is, despite how large Mumbai is, it sits merely on 1% of land on Maharashtra and consists of 11% of Maharashtra's population. But when it comes to GDP, we're quite big. Mumbai's GDP as of 2009-2010 was close to 204,000 crores, and which works out to about $40 billion. In fact, many countries have comparable GDPs, including Myanmar, Uruguay, Uzbekistan, and Yemen, so it's not small. And this is just Mumbai, this is not MMR. So, yeah. Sure? Yeah. Yes?
So this number of GDP for Mumbai, what is the source?
This is from the Maharashtra Economic Survey, which was conducted in 2019. We have the sources for you, and we'll email any of this presentation to any of. No, don't worry at all. Well, if we had to compare Mumbai with other cities in terms of GDP, Mumbai definitely comes out as the highest, closely followed by Delhi and Kolkata, and of course Chennai and Bangalore. Although when it comes to GDP growth rate, Mumbai is still high at 8.5%, but you can see much smaller cities like Bangalore have already beat Mumbai at 10.3%, so they're growing at a much faster rate than Mumbai is. Of course, followed closely behind by Delhi and Kolkata and Chennai and even Pune. And cities like Thane are catching up really fast as well. So Mumbai's GDP forms just about 22% of Maharashtra's pie and 6% of India's GDP. But when it comes to direct tax collection, Mumbai is extremely significant. It collects almost 1.52 trillion rupees, which forms up to 35% of India's direct tax collection. And in fact, the target for the fiscal 2011 is almost 40% of total collection, so which is very significant. It's important to ask how this money is being utilized for Bombay. So, but despite of all these snazzy figures when it comes to macro GDP levels, there are some sobering facts which are very particular to Mumbai. Mumbai registers a per capita income of 1,25,000 rupees, which is not very low. It's quite high in comparison. I think a national standard of 56,000 and a Maharashtra standard of 74,000. So that's not very high. But at the same time, you have 68%, and these are just estimations. Of course, it's impossible to measure the informal sector. So these are merely estimations, but we are sure that the actual figure is not far behind. 68% of the labor in Mumbai operates within the informal sector. And that is really, truly something to think about, which is why we included a session on the invisible worker and the informal sector in Mumbai and how they can be included. So this much of the population is technically not even contributing to the GDP as of today, not the full percentage at least. Now, worse, 62%, and this is as per the census of 2011, and I think Mr. P.K. Das will tell us that this is a lot more than just 62. We're looking forward to hear from you, Mr. Das. 62% of the city lives in slums. And this is really, a very, very sobering fact. And this stands out as a sore thumb in comparison to any other city, not only in India, but across the world. This is unacceptable, if we can say. But the interesting thing to note is that only 1 in 5 Mumbaikars are actually poor, which means that only 20% of Mumbai is poor. And this is as per, of course, this figure is again can be disputed, but this is as per the most recent socio-economic census that was conducted by MCGM, the results of which were released in September. So, well, if this is to be believed, only 20% of Mumbai is poor, then why are we having 62% or more people living in slums? Yeah, sure. Sure. Of the labor, of the active labor is operating within the informal sector. That's an estimate, as I said. There's no way to actually, yeah. Yes, no. Of the working labor force is operating within the informal sector. Yeah, sorry, if I didn't mention that. So, like I said, with respect to slum population, Mumbai stands out as a sore thumb, and even Kolkata, being the next highest, is just about half of Mumbai's slum population, which is not something to be proud of. Even in terms of percentage of poor, that is the below the poverty line population, Mumbai is quite high at 20%, followed closely by Chennai and, of course, Delhi and Kolkata at 14%. And these are figures from the 2005-06 NSSO data. Well, over to Dhaval.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Shilpa. So when we talk about Mumbai, it's a very complex picture that emerges. But then if we talk about the Mumbai metropolitan region, the picture becomes complexer, if you can say. It's not much different. So in terms of the population growth rate, if, this is what has basically happened. And if you talk about the MMR, it's much larger than what Mumbai covers. It's much larger than the 1% of the area covered by Mumbai. Goes right up to Alibag, parts of Thane rural, Thane city, up to almost up to Shahpur, and up to Khopoli on the Mumbai-Pune highway. And this is the kind of, in the last decade, the population growth that the region has witnessed. And if you see Kharghar, there, of course, it's from 60,000 to almost 70, from 6,000 to 73 odd thousand in 1 decade, which registers a growth rate of around 1,117%, one of the most unprecedented growth rates in population recorded ever, anywhere in the world. And but similarly, if you look at it, like this, the influx of people into the MMR has, like, been the boon of Mumbai in that sense, but it has been the bane of MMR, because the population growth rate in Mumbai in the last decade has actually registered a decline. In fact, if you consider the island city, then it has actually registered a negative growth of minus 5.75%, because of various obvious reasons. And the suburbs, especially from around 28% in the last decade, in 2001, has gone down to just about 8.1% now. But again, against that, the MMR has really been galloping at a very, very fast rate. And this goes to show that with this kind of population projection and the growth rate, and some figures that we will see for the projection of till 2030, this is a very unsustainable thing. And if we don't plan for it now, then MMR itself is going to face a lot of problems in the future. We'll just talk about it. So, yeah. 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 Right. We charted out the boundaries more or less, but yeah, that's what it is. So what this has resulted into is MMR as an urban agglomeration constitutes to 25% of the population of the state of Maharashtra, and the population of this region is almost thrice the population of the state. At 54%, where the average population growth rate in Maharashtra, as per this census, is just 16%. So that is very telling. So, like, now the question is that what an average Mumbaiker or what an average Indian would think when he thinks about Mumbai. And so here it's more pictures that tell the story. So, and this almost zero availability of open space to us in Mumbai is against the National Building Code standards of 4 acres per 1,000 residents. And so we don't have any in that case. And if politicians, like, political leadership of the city have their way, then perhaps we will also lose our race course and whatnot. This is Powai, yeah. And unfortunately, there's another photograph which shows the other side of the coin, rather the ugly underbelly of Mumbai. And well, this is something that we all face, and we have just recently faced and still are continuing to reel under the monsoon. The rains have stopped, but the woes continue. It's not just the old building, and this is a very significant, for our friends from Delhi, this is a very significant picture, because it's not just shows in the backdrop one of the busiest stations in the world, the VT or the CST, but right on the left of this road is the BMC headquarters, the agency which is the custodian of roads in Mumbai, and next to it is one of India's largest and one of India's most influential media houses, that's the Times of India headquarters. So if the condition of the roads here is this during an average monsoon, then what would it be from the rest of the city? And this is, of course, everyone is familiar with. And we also had a taste of it this morning. And of course, sardines in a can are more comfortable. So, and it's not just the trains. It's just about everywhere. And coupled with this, like, the failure of our utilities in providing some very basic amenities like water and sanitation. And especially for water, like we have just recently completed a very in-depth study of water supply in Mumbai. The study on the supply in MMR is currently underway. And the study on water has been critically reviewed by Dr. Madhavrao Chitle, who is considered to be one of the best. And it's being translated to Marathi and is due for publication in about the next 1 month. And as I said, this is the other side of the coin, that for 62% of the people, or probably much more, this is what is home.
Just to Just to explain the 62%, the distribution of 62%. This is from a recent study done by 3 urban planners, very prominent urban planners, including Mr. Vidyadhar Phatak from Mumbai. This graph essentially illustrates the income spread in Mumbai, and this is the monthly income, monthly household income on the x-axis, and the percentage of households for each of these income brackets on the y-axis. So you see that a bulk of Mumbai's population falls within this income range, which is 2,500 rupees per month to around maybe 42,500 rupees a month. But when you look at the housing spread for the same population distribution, you'll see that it is this same income, the same population, which is continuing to languish and live in slum rehab units, chawls, slums, and including payment dwellings. So basically, it's only people who earn close to 67,000 rupees a month and above who are even able to rent or afford even a 1 BHK in Mumbai today, which is very, very significant, extremely significant. So is it really truly one of the world's worst cities to live in? We need to ask ourselves this. And maybe Mumbai is the one of the most lovable cities, but it's certainly not a very livable city. If the recent index published by economists is to be believed, we were ranked 114 out of a subset of 140 cities all across the world in terms of livability. And we were evaluated on 5 different parameters, including security and access to services and citizen participation and happiness and things like that. So we scored 114, and in Shanghai and Beijing were way ahead. Beijing was ranked 72 and Shanghai was ranked 79. I mentioned Shanghai because we often compare ourselves to Shanghai and we want to be Shanghai. So we have a long way to go even if we want to be Shanghai. And cities that came very close to us include, cities that come after us include, we were just ranked above Jakarta, Dhaka, and Zimbabwe. So that gives you a little bit of a perspective on how livable Mumbai is. What will 2030 look like? If things are so bad now, what will 2030 look like? Maharashtra will be 58% urban, which is the 3rd most urban state in the country. MMR will have a population of 33 million people, and it will be the most populous urban agglomeration in the country. Mumbai's MMR's GDP will be close to $265 billion, which is larger than GDPs of countries like Malaysia, Chile, Colombia, Israel, and Portugal today, and a per capita GDP of $8,000 US. Now this is significant because, these are all figures from the recent McKinsey study on India's urban awakening. And according to them, Mumbai will require $220 billion in infrastructure capex investment over the next 20-25 years, which is extremely. This is population, yeah. Yes, 33 million. MMR. This is for MMR. Yes. Yeah. So that's the state. And these are, again, some alarming figures, if they are to be believed. Sure. Yeah. No. Yeah. 20 to 33. Yeah. Yeah.
Going up by 6 times.
Yes. Yeah, it's a good thing. Yeah. If these predictions are to be believed, yeah. Yeah. Yes, of course. Well, so this means a 94% increase in demand for water, a 108% increase in the quantity of sewage generated, a 234% increase in solid waste generated, and a 50% increase in public transport usage. So, just something to think about. Dhaval. Yeah.
By the government to put in some mitigation measures. But how far these success, and there's a lot of money being pumped into the city of Mumbai and also the MMR region. And if we take a look at this is only for the city of Mumbai and not for the MMR. If we look at the key projects of the BMC and the MMRDA, which are current and planned. So of course this figure is extended, and it also includes the Trans Harbour Sea Link and the 1,500 crore for skywalks. Again, something which hints at exclusion. Because when you talk about skywalks, you leave out pedestrians from your transport design. Because unless a person has to climb all that 3 stories and then walk across a road, I don't know how feasible it is for the city transport planning. But in any case, this is 1,500 crore has been earmarked, and the total expenditure that is current and planned is to the tune of 1,37,000 odd crore, which is a huge significant number. Please, sir.
You mentioned crores, you mean rupees. Rupees. And when you mention $1 million, you are mentioning that.
Yeah, you're mentioning dollars, right? So yeah, dollars has to be, yeah, sorry. This is rupees. Absolutely. And at the same time, what is shocking is that for the entire state of Maharashtra, for the entire works of the various departments, the total revenue expenditure as per the current state budget is significantly less than what has been planned for Mumbai and what is currently being pumped into Mumbai. So with all this money coming in, where does it go? And that is the moot question, that we perhaps can address in this roundtable. And these are the several central government schemes which are very, very relevant to Mumbai and which are either in operation or are in the stages of being put into operation. And it's a UIG, almost everything that JNRM has for urbanization, including the Rajiv Awas Yojana, besides the Rajiv Awas Yojana, the Shahri Rozgar Yojana, and the Housing for Urban Poor, Cost of Sanitation Scheme, even HRN assessment schemes. So very well-meaning schemes currently underway, and even very well-meaning policies for housing and habitat, and on street vendors, urban sanitation policy, and urban transport policy. The problem is that while all of these efforts are on, the ground result or the change that we witness is almost next to zero, in spite of all this money being pumped in. And this is especially telling because there are about 7 agencies that govern us in Mumbai, that govern everyday life in Mumbai, especially the collectorates, the MMRDA, BEST, PWD, MSRDC, BEST. And besides these agencies, there are utilities. And the lack of coordination interdepartmentally and in between these agencies is something really, really shocking. So for example, what happens is that MMRDA constructs a road, hands it back over to BMC for maintenance, and then someone from an MTNL comes and digs it up. And then the question arises of who is responsible to fill that up or to maintain that work. So this is the governance hodgepodge that is creating a lot of problems for Mumbai.
Yeah, I think it's very clear who's to do what.
Yeah, it is.
It is very clear.
It is.
Only media makes it that way, and I think the officers concerned
Also talk in that sense. And so what has happened is that there are footpaths that have been dug out, and there have been claims that this part doesn't belong to us and this part doesn't belong to whom. So and that particular portion of a footpath remains dug up for days together.
everything is very clear.
But that's what?
It's clear to be not clear, that's all it is.
It doesn't happen, it doesn't seem to be clear, at least on the ground. And this perhaps also, points at a very, very important issue of whether we must take a relook, whether it's time for the government and the planners to take a relook at the entire governance of not just the Mumbai city, but that of the entire MMR. Because today, besides these agencies which are in Mumbai, like MMR constitutes of around 17 municipalities, 19 municipal councils, and 2,000 odd villages. And now, with the current population growth rate and the projected population growth rate, the services and the infrastructure is going to be put under severe pressure. So eventually, should we look at the holistic development of the entire region, or really divide it into parts and let each one have its own way without any coordination or unison amongst these agencies? And the objective of today's roundtable is something very clear, that this is one of the first series of events that both ORF Mumbai and Delhi is planning on the issue of urban issues in Mumbai. And probably the next in line is going to be just on transportation in Mumbai. And at the end of this series, what we plan to do is publish some policy briefs and some issue briefs for mass circulation. And the unfortunate part of being a think tank is that we can only do so much. And when it comes to the implementation of the measure of our success, it's very impossible to even think of. And these are some of our forthcoming publications in the space of urban renewal. One, as I said, is on water. The other one is making a critical inquiry into the entire, this very controversial slum redevelopment authority, and where it has gone wrong and why it has gone wrong. And the other one, which is of of a different nature is on the Maharashtra Nature Park or the Mahim Nature Park, which is a very significant green space in Mumbai, which unfortunately most of us present in this room wouldn't know of. And it's not even mentioned in any of the government websites. Even the tourism, the Maharashtra tourism website has no mention of this gem, this natural gem that lies in Mumbai. And so these are the studies, these are forthcoming studies. And some of our publications that are already there in the space of urban renewal are on the redevelopment of the Mithi, which is again a 1600 crore project with very much evidence of anything being spent anywhere. And I think already around 8 to 10,000, 8 to 100 crores have already been spent by both BMC and MMRDA. The other one is on affordable housing. That's how it can be made possible. And our intervention as far as the second airport at Panvel that's coming up. So thank you very much. And I'll just now invite